the late 40s to the late 60s, times were hard for Washington. Hard in a way they had never been before. Losing season after losing season, back-to-back one-win seasons, a far cry from the juggernaut it was during those earliest NFL years. Washington's front office was desperate to turn the situation around. And in those days, if winning was the goal, there was one man you wanted leading your team. This is Hail Tales, stories from Washington football history, the Lombardi year. Let's be clear, Vince Lombardi to Washington shouldn't have even been on the table.
This is David Marinus. I'm the author of When Pride Still Mattered, the biography of Vince Lombardi.
The Green Bay Packers head coach had already cemented himself as perhaps the greatest ever. He never had a losing season as head coach in the NFL, brought Green Bay 5 NFL championships in 7 years, including the league's first 2 Super Bowls. In his eyes, it was time to move on.
Lombardi retired as a coach for the Packers after the second Super Bowl in early 1968. And for the next year, he was only the general manager of the team.
The pivot from coach to general manager was a challenging one.
He couldn't stand not being with the players. He would make so much noise up in his place next to the press box at Packer games that they had to soundproof it. He was very unhappy for that year. It was also, he wanted to get back into coaching. It was also a time when the world of professional football was changing. The players were getting more power, and Lombardi wanted to figure out how to deal with that. And he was also frustrated in that he wanted to have some part of ownership, and he couldn't get that with the Packers because, wonderfully, in my opinion, there was no owner of the Packers. It was owned by the community. So that combined with the fact that in Washington, the owner of the Redskins, Edward Bennett Williams, believed in what he called competition living. And to him, the patron saint of that form of life was Vince Lombardi. They were both Catholics. They both loved to win. Williams would do anything to get Lombardi to be the coach.
Of course, Edward Bennett Williams, who was the managing partner of the Redskins organization at the time, was always full of surprises.
Mike Bragg, punter for Washington from 1968 to 1979.
And he was a great speaker, a great salesman, a great attorney in the courtroom, obviously. And, he talked Coach Lombardi out of retirement. My first year in 1968, we played the Packers at home. And I remember coming on the field to warm up. Vince Lombardi was then the general manager. And he was sitting in the owner's box at RFK. And I come on the field and I look up and I see the owner's box, and there's Vince Lombardi with his camel hair overcoat on, his fedora, and those glasses he wore on. I'm like, so wow, there's the old man. I had no idea that the next year he was coming out of retirement and coming to coach us.
In early 1969, Vince Lombardi became the head coach and executive vice president of Washington and was given a 5% stake in ownership.
This is the proudest moment of my life with the Redskins to present to you Vince Lombardi.
He got to Washington that spring. He was kind of the toast of the town. It was actually early spring, and Nixon had just been inaugurated as president, but Vince Lombardi was the most popular guy in town. There's this scene in my book where he's with Williams walking into Duke Ziebert's restaurant on Connecticut Avenue, which was kind of a place where, sort of power brokers met. And they all rose to their feet and gave Lombardi a standing ovation. David Broder, the great political reporter for the Post, said that of all the people in town, it was Lombardi, not Nixon, who was the toast of the town that winter and spring.
I'm very happy to be here, believe me. Most happy to be a Washington Redskin.
He was very humble in front of the cameras and the press, and he says, well, if possible, we'd like to have our winner our first year. Okay, Coach, yeah.
When do you expect to have a winner? The first year, the second?
I'd like to have a winner the first year, if possible.
He'd have a lot of work to do. Fullback Chuck Mersine, who was with Washington for 2 separate periods in the 1960s, remembers what the team vibe was in his pre-Lombardi stint.
When I was there at first, it was kind of an old pals, that kind of thing. Everybody would go out drinking and so forth together. Sonny was kind of the ringleader, Sonny Jurgensen. You could tell that it wasn't a really greatly disciplined team.
When Otto Graham was the coach, the players would have a pool.
Tommy McVean, longtime equipment manager for Washington.
They'd all put in $10 or $5 or whatever, and they'd count how many times Otto would clap after the play. Good play. Three claps, and I'd have a chart, and they would give me $20 to keep track of how many times he'd hit the clipboard with it.
When Lombardi joined, Washington had just wrapped up its 9th losing season in 11 years.
Lombardi was accustomed to coming into a situation like that. When he'd come to the Green Bay Packers in 1959, they'd have several losing seasons in a row. The year before, they'd won only 1 game. He immediately turned them around and created a winning season. And he thought he could do the same with the Redskins. So it was no trouble at all for Lombardi. He liked starting over. He knew that the Redskins, like the Packers of 1959, had some raw talent. He just needed to be put into shape.
The players knew that everything was about to change.
Unbelievably over the top, crazy madness, screaming, yelling, cussing.
Very disciplined, very tough guy. A guy who wasn't going to be your best friend for sure, but you knew was a leader.
Like Chuck Mersine, cornerback Mike Bass had some experience under Lombardi. Bass was originally drafted by the Packers in 1967, but was sold to the Lions before the start of the season.
And so I knew exactly what to expect. And from Chris Hamburger to the rest of them, asking me, what was he like? What can we expect? It was going to be a different team altogether.
Everybody's grabbing out there. Nobody's touching.
Lombardi was a tough coach. And, the mythology revolves around a saying attributed to him, winning isn't everything, it's the only thing. It wasn't true. He wasn't like that. A lot of coaches after Lombardi tried to pretend they were Lombardi, and they were tough guys, but they didn't understand the other part of it, which was that Lombardi understood his players, that they might sort of hate him on a daily basis, but loved him on a larger scale. And the love side was actually stronger than the hate side. So his, like Sonny Jurgensen, who was the quarterback of the Redskins then, called up Paul Hornung, who was the star for the Packers, and said, how am I going to deal with this guy? Paul said to Sonny, you're going to love him because he cares about his players and he knows how to win, and he has that balance of both.
Sonny Jurgensen got in the best shape of his life ahead of Lombardi's first season. All-pro linebacker Sam Huff came out of retirement to play for the coach. There was a different feeling in the air in Washington. Work was underway to get that winner Lombardi's first year.
The Lombardi era begins at high noon today for the Redskins. A total of 67 veterans and rookies are scheduled to arrive in Carlisle, Pennsylvania for the opening of training camp. They will draw equipment and meet their new boss tonight at the first team meeting.
He was humorous to me in many ways.
Former linebacker Chris Hamburger, a 6-time All-Pro who played 14 seasons with Washington from 1965 to 1978.
He was very strict on, not many rules, but very strict about the ones that he had. And I mean, if he said a meeting started at 8 o'clock and he walked in at 10 minutes of, and then you walked in at 5 minutes of, you're late and you're going to get fined. They called it Lombardi time.
You didn't want to be late by his definition of the word. You didn't want to find yourself on the wrong side of something he was strict about.
I remember one player, we're in a meeting, and this player, he got injured, I think, in the morning practice and training camp. He didn't show up evidently for treatment when he should have before the afternoon practice. So we're in the meeting, and Coach Lombardi walks in. He's walking up the aisle, and he starts talking, and he mentioned the player's name, and he said, "You report to the Norfolk Neptunes by such and such." He fired him right then and there for not showing up for treatment.
Lombardi was all about accountability. He was eagle-eyed.
So one day, Lombardi, he told the coaches, "I'll see you inside. I want to talk to Tommy." Put his arm around me, and we started continuing to walk across the street. And he says, "Tommy, is there something you want to tell me?" I said, "Well, what do you mean, Coach?" He says, "You didn't take communion this morning. There's something you want to tell me." I said, Coach, we scrimmaged in the pouring down rain at the high school last night. The equipment was so muddy, the shoes, the uniforms, I had to wash everything. I says, "We were working till 2:30 in the morning." He said, "That's a hell of an excuse."
And he wanted his guys to know he was always watching.
He came up and said, "Glad to have you at training camp. We're going to have a great year." That's it. So I'm thinking, wow, so that was it? And then we go on the field that afternoon, like an hour and a half or 2 hours later, and he's watching me punt. And I hit one that wasn't so good, off the side of the foot a little bit. He says, "What the hell was that?" And I'm going, oh. He used to ride around on a golf cart and ride right up and put that golf cart, which was almost in your way. And he would sit there and wait. And you said, okay, I better not hit another one like that. I better hit a good one. So he had a way that, he could get inside your head and put pressure on you. He did it to everybody.
John Jaquia played safety for Washington from 1970 to 1972. During his rookie year, he kept a diary of his time at training camp and remembers Lombardi's attentiveness and the psychological effect that had.
Lombardi seems to be everywhere and see everything. He watched me make a good play and shouted, "That's the way to play football, son." And I felt about 10 feet tall. Then later I was beaten on a pass pattern, and he was on the other side of the field watching a different drill, and I'm sure his back was turned to our drill. But he roared, "Who was that defensive back?" And a coach yelled, "It was Jaquia." And he yelled, "That's no way to play football, son." I spent the rest of the afternoon trying my damnedest to be inconspicuous.
He loved to push his team. There was undeniably a brutality to the environments he oversaw.
So I have some wonderful memories.
Former Washington offensive lineman Ray Schonke remembers.
But I also have some really tough times, when I saw how this guy could drive you. And you had to learn to play hurt.
One little tidbit that happened to me, he had what they call the hamburger drill.
Former Washington tight end Pat Richter.
And it was an offensive person blocking against a linebacker. And I had a single bar on my face mask. And his elbow came up and hit me in the nose. And I realized that quite quickly that it had busted my nose. And yet I took a couple more blocks and were fairly successful. A couple blocks. And he mentioned one of the coaches back there, it took a lot of guts for the kid to do that.
I played with knees all banged up, and he would scream at you and call you names if you weren't tough enough. But you found out you could play. I played with a separated rib cage. And how in the hell, I could hardly breathe. And the pain was just excruciating. But I played with that sucker. I was his top lineman. I mean, it was crazy. But he was an inspiration.
This once-in-a-generation coach had players wanting to put their body on the line. He was clear about how much he cared about them, as ball players and as men.
When we were coming back from Dallas, and I remember he came up to me and he started rubbing my shoulders and telling me how proud he was of me and how excited he was that he's looking forward to playing again with me next year. And I was just, like, this is, like God blessing you.
He also had a humanity part where he say, even though you put yourself at risk, take it easy, make sure that you protect yourself in that regard, even though you had done something that was a little bit off the wall, so to speak. So he was a great relationship that we had, the players, the coach. He demanded very much everything that you had, yet you realized that here was an opportunity for me to be successful, to win games we had not won in the past.
When they did. Lombardi's presence had an immediate effect as Washington would put together its best season in 2 decades.
And you could just see the difference in the team, the toughness of the team.
And I think everyone realized that he was turning that franchise around.
He saw that there was enough talent there. It just needed to be organized and motivated. And those are 2 things that Lombardi was the best at.
The discipline completely changed under Coach Lombardi. Coach Lombardi demanded excellence and precise dedication. And he used to say, "It's what you're doing or about to do bringing you any closer to your main objective, winning. Winning isn't just football, winning is life."
The lessons Lombardi imparted on his players went far beyond the football field.
I just always had a feeling that, you just never give up, never quit. That kind of a philosophy, 110% effort. You're going to get knocked down, but get back up. That kind of thing.
You knew that when you're done with football, whatever you're doing, whether you're in banking or in police and fire, whatever, people come to you for advice and counsel. And when they do that, you got to give them their best shot and not take a slovenly, careless attitude, cause something much more difficult than a football game.
He's that father that you wanted to cuss out under your breath, but at the same time you respected him so much that just having him say good job and say your name, you could turn and just pound your chest. Coach Lombardi said something to me, and that was one of the things that kept me wanting to play pro football after he cut me in Green Bay. He said to me, "Mike, you can play in this league." And that, to this day, stays in my mind.
Let alone football being transformed, lives were being changed by this man in Washington in less than a year. With Lombardi at the helm, there was so much excitement about the team's future. And then, it all took a turn.
Washington Redskins coach Vince Lombardi had a 2-foot section of his colon removed today after surgeons discovered a tumor during an exploratory operation.
He was diagnosed with an aggressive form of colon cancer.
There was a strike that year, and so he was at Georgetown Hospital, and we were practicing together as a team on the upper field at Georgetown University. So all of a sudden we see this limousine Cadillac driving across the upper field. I don't know how it got out there. And we're going like, what the heck is this?
We were getting ready to run the before practice exercises like Coach Lombardi would have us do.
He's got on his hospital gown robe. He's got on his wristband and, like some tubes out of him and all that. And he got out of the car and said, "I'm glad you're practicing together. Whatever you do, stick together."
He just got back in the car and left, and that's the last time I ever saw him.
Sunday, August 9th. We had the day off with films this evening. I spent a while talking with Jerry Smith today. He talked a lot about Vince Lombardi and about what a truly great person he is. Jerry said that Lombardi had been given last rites. He also said that he had been taking cobalt treatments for cancer for over 2 years and that he knew he only had a short time to live before he took over the Redskins.
Vince Lombardi passed away on September 3rd, 1970, at Georgetown University Hospital.
We flew up to New York to go to his funeral at St. Patrick's Cathedral.
I remember the funeral at St. Patrick's Cathedral. I was there with the rest of the Redskins and the Packers, and it was wall to wall. It was completely packed and out onto Fifth Avenue. It was amazing. It was quite something. And, sad moment. He was only 57 years old. That's young.
Who knows what Lombardi would have done with that team if he'd lived. It's a cliche to talk about football culture, but he definitely changed the whole sensibility of football in Washington. Made it something that players wanted to play for that team again. He set a standard that had to be met and was for most of the time for the next few decades. So he turned things around.
To come out of retirement to come to coach our team was a great thrill and opportunity to be around a great man. You see why he was successful. That's something that you live with the rest of your life. And all of us learned from him in that regard. It was just a great opportunity and tragically short-lived.
Excellence must be pursued. It must be wooed with all of one's might and every bit of effort that we have. And each day there's a new encounter. Each week is a new challenge. And all of the display and all of the noise and all of the glamour and all of the color and all of the excitement and all of the rings and all of the money, these are the things that really linger only in the memory. But the spirit, the will to excel, the will to win, these are the things that endure.
Like, subscribe, comment, and stay tuned for more Hail Tales episodes this summer. This episode of Hail Tales was narrated, produced, and researched by me, Hannah Lichtenstein, senior copywriter for the Washington Commanders. It was produced and edited by Jason Johnson, edited by Nick Lianos. Executive producers are Ryan Yoakum and Kevin Klein. Additional voiceover help comes from Bram Weinstein. Graphics designed by Zach Osborne and Matt Cashman. Thank you to our guests for their contributions, and thank you for listening.